I already know this is going to be a controversial one, but it needs to be said. Here's why realtors will now require signatures on their contracts before ever even showing you a home. I'm Kyle Wong, licensed realtor here in Colorado. If you have any questions about the topics discussed here today, connect with me using the link below. So, this is a fun one. First and foremost, let me just lay this out. For ease of use and best business practice, me and my team had always required signatures before we did business with our clients, right? And the reason why is because I can't even call you a client until we actually have our contract signed. And you might be thinking, oh, you just want to lock me into something. I don't want to work with you if you don't want to work with me. There's no purpose in me, oh, you signed, now you have to work with me. That's not enjoyable, it's not right, and it's just not fun. So I don't know why I or anybody in their right mind would do that unless you hate yourself. So yeah, let me just get that out of the way. First of all, I'm talking specifically about my buyer clients. Listings, whole different thing. But when you come to me and you say, hey, Kyle, I really want to purchase a home. How can we go about that? I'll always have my initial buyer's consultation with you. So that's where I do two things. So I get your specific needs for a property, laying out area, price range, timeline, stuff like that, and then walking through the actual process of purchasing a home. And again, whether you're a first-time home buyer or you're a seasoned investor, I always walk through that buyer's consultation to make sure we're on the same page and so that expectations are set properly before anything ever gets signed, anything ever gets done. I explained it all. Okay. And then after that, and you're like, cool, I'm ready to go. That sounds good with me. Then I will say, cool, I'm going to send you a couple documents here. Here is what they are. So I send two when I'm working with buyer clients. It is the exclusive right to buy, which lays out my responsibilities and duties to you as your fiduciary, which means I am legally responsible for you now. And you might be thinking like, oh, it's just to lock me in. Like, no, it actually lays out what happens in court if I fail to do my job. So it's a huge liability for me to represent you as my client. And so it lays out how I get paid, which is something that you should be discussing with your real estate agent before you sign anything. And then I also send a second document called the Definitions of Working Relationships. That one's pretty straightforward. It's very short. It just explains exactly what it sounds like. It is the definitions of our working relationship. So unless it's like a funny circumstance, I always work with you as my client, meaning I represent you, I look out for your best interest, I put your interest above mine. Yeah, in every true sense of the words, like I represent you. Think of it this way. If you've never heard of agency before, agency agreements, it's like if you were in a job and your family member came to you and said, hey, I need help buying a house. It's basically that like moral obligation that you have legally, right? So I legally have an obligation to my clients to uphold their best interest and advise them in the ways that I think they should go. Okay, that's not super important. So I send those two documents and I explain everything. So what I do personally is if I don't walk through that with them on the phone, I send them a Loom video, which is just like a screen record of me going line by line and just saying, hey, here's what this section is, here's what this section is, here's what this section is. And I just send an email with the contract and I say, please advise any legal counsel, CPA, any accountant, any dads, moms out there that you need to advise. And I make sure that they get all eyes on this contract that they need to feel comfortable before signing it. And that's actually a point I'm going to touch on a little bit later, but reason why I'm actually talking about this now is because I want full transparency so that you as my clients or potential clients know how we do business, not only for your sake but for our sake, right? We have to protect ourselves as well because we have fired clients before, but also with the recent NAR, National Association of Realtor lawsuits, there's been a lot of misinformation and just speculation and lots of things. So I want to clear things up on the legal side. It hasn't really changed anything on our end just because we have had good business practices, not only in Colorado. Colorado has actually been really strict on their documentation and contract process, which is great. But us as a team, as the Moxie Property Group, as Kyle Wong doing business here, we just have good business practices. It's the best way to go. Protects us, protects you. It's just a smart way to do things. But now, as of August 15th, 2024, it is actually required for us as realtors, as real estate agent licensees by the state, to have signatures before we ever walk into a home. And well, now you really might be thinking like, well, I literally just wanted to see the house, like I'm not signing to an agent. And I get that, I really do. Because, you know, let's say you just drive by and you call the number on the sign, you're like, hey, we just thought this house was cute, like just wanted to see it. Cool, you need to sign this contract. Whoa, 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 whoa. I get how that can be scary. So as I would advise my clients, first of all, if I'm working with them, like I would have an exclusive right to buy agency agreement signed. But here's what you can do. What you can always say, because it is required. Any agent is going to require this, and if they don't, they are going against the law. And I would not work with people who are like, oh, well, I can let this one slide. Do not do that. That's a huge red flag. If they're willing to bend the rules and do something illegal right up front, be very cautious about working with them. But you as the client, I get you don't want to be tied in. So a couple things I could look out for is suggest a one-time or a one-day buyer's agreement. So basically, there's a section where it says how long your agency lasts, right? So I usually set my buyer's agreements up for 6 months because, you know, from us actually shopping to closing on a home, it can take a long time, so it just depends. But you can just say, hey, I just want to do a one-day buyer's agreement just so I can tour the home. Cool, I can do that for you. And if they don't even know what that is, that's a huge red flag. But so there's a date where it says listing period, which is when you're working together. Just literally put it for that day and it expires tomorrow. These contracts, the way they work is if you closed on a house before that listing period ends, then it automatically terminates, right? They're not just perpetually your real estate agent. That's not how agency works. So just say, hey, just do a one day buyer's agreement, or you can do a second thing. If you want redundancy, do both, but anything can make the contract null and void. So you can also say, hey, well, I want to do like a one day listing agreement. Cool, great, for this specific property, right? So you're going to view 123 Main Street. Awesome. You put in a section, actually let me pull up what section it is exactly, just so you know. Because there's a section in the contract that specifies what property would be satisfactory to you, and you can put the exact address in there. That way there is no ambiguity whatsoever. So let me find it really quick. Stand by, sorry for the dead period. Okay, so it's section 3.4, it's pretty high up. It's right after the signatures. It says property means real estate which substantially property means real estate which substantially meets the following requirements or is acceptable to buyer. So in that box there, put in 123 Main Street. And the reason why is because then the agent can't just go and write an offer for you on, 225 Main Street or 26 Broadway or whatever, which they were not going to do in the first place, but it doesn't obligate you to get into anything else, if that makes sense. So that's what I would require. And here's a little story on why this is important. I gave you like the legal aspect and like why it makes sense, but there I was early on in my real estate career, young, wide-eyed, excited. And I was in several car groups and I was meeting people left and right, and I was excited about opportunities. And as you are, you're new in the business, you get excited about a lot of things. And I had posted marketing material for another agent for a beautiful listing. I think it was in Parker. And huge house, beautiful house, really big garage. That was like the selling point. And somebody that I was familiar with, I wouldn't even say I knew, I was familiar with just kind of through mutual friends and in a car group, had reached out and he's like, hey, this is a beautiful property. Can we tour it? And I was just like, okay. And he messages, he's like, yeah, I think I have somebody that's interested. And so that's when I start getting like, okay, all right, let's do this. And yeah, this was back, again, I was new in the business. I was still learning. And I get excited and I work on scheduling it. And so again, proper practice would have been to have that meeting, a buyer's consultation, get a buyer's agreement signed, get a proof of funds, do all the vetting and all that stuff beforehand. But again, we also like to work with our clients and meet them where they're at, right? So there are just some things that some people are just not comfortable with. Proof of funds can be kind of a weird thing, like, hey, show me that you actually have the money to buy this house, which makes sense. But at the same time, some people can get a little off at that. And especially at this higher price point, right? You start getting into issues with like anonymity. People don't want to be known. Maybe they're celebrities, maybe they're politicians, things like that, and these really high dollar properties. And so not only do they not just want people wasting their time and going through their house, you know, either the sellers or their agents, but also like there's kind of a security factor, right? So you want to make sure that you're vetting these people. And so reached out to the listing agent, and listing agent asked for a proof of funds. And I had actually not done this at this point before. I had gotten, I mean, with my buyer clients, we had gotten proof of funds or pre-approval letters as we were ready to submit an offer, but for actually just viewing a property, right? For getting a tour set up, had never had to do that. So I reached out to my client. I'm like, hey, they're looking for a proof of funds. They just want to verify. And I was like, it's not really a big deal. I mean, this is pretty normal, which it was, especially at this price point. And my client blows up. He's getting upset. He's like, how could they? That's not how it was in New York. Like, I've never seen this before. Like, how offensive is this? And I start to wonder, I'm like, shoot, man, like, hey, I don't want to set you off. Like, I'm sorry, man. I promise I'm not, trying to ask about your financial ability. Rookie mistake. Sign number one, by the way. And I'm like, oh shoot. So I'm kind of freaking out and eventually, and I told him exactly what it was. Like, hey, just talk to your financial institution, have them print out a proof of funds. Financial institutions, here's the thing. Financial institutions will always be comfortable and know exactly what you're talking about with giving you a proof of funds. They'll know what it is. So just go to your Charles Schwab, go to your Fidelity, go to whoever holds your money and say, hey, I need a proof of funds. And it's just a statement saying, Mr. and Mrs. blah, blah, blah has an account with a value in excess of blank amount dated this date, right? It's just them verifying that you have money is all. Similar things, you can get a pre-approval letter from a lender. It's basically them just saying like, hey, we'll lend up to this amount conditionally. Besides the point, proof of funds. Yeah, and this was a client too who was like, yeah, I mean, I'm looking for my parents. Oh, cool, sure. Yeah, so they live here. Yeah, great. Oh, they've got a business here. Oh, cool. And, as I'm listening to the story, I'm like, yeah, totally makes sense. And get to the proof of funds, and I asked for it, and he sends me a screenshot of a pretty decent amount in like a Fidelity account. I just recognize the font because I have a Fidelity account. And I'm like, he's like, it's a personal one. It's not for my parents. Like, all right. And so I submit it to the listing agent, and they're like, that's not the amount, like not even close. And it was a lot of money, but it was not even close to the amount of the house. And this agent was like, is this, for the son? And I'm like, yeah, don't have anything from the parents though. And she's like, all right, okay, yeah. Set up the showing, beautiful house, go through everything, and yeah, he's just kind of like very antagonistic. So listing agent and somebody else that she had there was showing us beautiful property, touring. He's asking good questions, but yeah, it's just like, oh, this and that. I'm like, what the heck? Like, kind of harsh on this property, man. Which, hey, whatever. Not super used to this at this point, but sure. And we get through, then we talk separately after the tour and start setting up more showings. Like, okay, well, what about this one? What about this one? And some let us go through, no problem. And then we get to one And this is the one I feel the absolute worst about, because it was actually an agent that I knew through social media. We had connected with several times, just a very well-known name in Colorado, super high producing, very well-known luxury agent in Colorado, was representing a celebrity, right? She had signed an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement. So everybody knew who the celebrity was, though, of course. It was like literally on the news. And so we're touring this house. She doesn't even ask. She's like, yeah, I would love a pre-approval, but like, hey, I know you, I trust you. So I'm sticking my neck out at this point for this guy, right? And we go through the property and it's like, oh, okay, cool. And she keeps following up with me, as she should. And she's like, hey, like, where are we at with this? Like, we toured it, haven't really given me an answer. Did they like it? Did they not like it? What's going on? So I start reaching out to my client and just slowly, fewer and fewer communications, hearing less and less. I'm not getting anything. And eventually it's just kind of like, oh yeah, they put their money in other ventures. And I'm like, all right, this is weird. Like, this is weird. Yeah, long story short, I heard through the grapevine, like, this guy just kind of is known for this. And I honestly was very surprised, because I'm like, who would set up this many showings, looking at all these properties, and for what? Honestly, for what? Like, I was so surprised that somebody would waste my time, the listing agent's time, and their own time looking at properties they had no intentions to buy. Like, what's the point of that? And again, I'm not saying like, oh, I had to show properties, woe is me. But like, if you say one thing, but you have no intention to do that, that's where I have a problem. So all that to say, I stuck out my neck for this guy, put my reputation on the line. Like, these people seriously were trying to take care of us and make exceptions and do all these things. And you know, buyer's agreements are very important. I don't want to waste your time. We always say here on the team, my actions match your motivation. So if you're motivated, you want to get things moving along, cool. I'll tell you how to do that. I will show you and I will make that happen for you. But if you're not interested, you're delaying, great, that's fine. Then we'll do that too. So yeah, I say all that. I tell that story because it protects me, protects my time, protects the industry, honestly, but most importantly, it protects you. And now the law requires it. So if this is something that you want to circumvent somehow, I mean, sure, go ahead. I don't know. Yes, there are some sleazy real estate agents out there, but just like, we're doing this for you. We're doing this for the greater good, trust me. Yeah, I always say this is good for the consumer, for the client, because it makes very clear what exactly my role is, lays out our relationship professionally, explains what a fiduciary is if they haven't heard of that before, and just my duties to you as my client, right? Until we have anything signed, you're not my client, right? Think of an attorney, because real estate agents, if I'm not mistaken, are the only people in a separate profession that are actually practicing law in a limited capacity. We are practicing real estate law in limited capacity. Not attorneys, obviously, but similar in the way that you are my client, I represent you, I look out for you, I'm your fiduciary, right? And attorneys are synonymous with contracts, but all of a sudden it's a real estate agent, it's like, ooh, scary contract. Sure. But yeah, I'm just, advice, I always am super clear and upfront about what we're doing, what you're signing. I go through and explain it with you. And I would say this too, when you're looking for an agent, if they can't go through it line by line and explain it to you, if they don't understand it themselves, that's a big problem. That's a big problem, because you as the client need to understand it. Don't sign anything you don't understand. I know we always joke about the terms and conditions, but like, there are some serious implications when it comes to buying a house and, you know, the transfer of hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars. It's a big deal. It's a very big deal. So if they cannot explain it to you clearly, that's a red flag. I definitely would look out for that. So yeah, that's it. That's why it's important. That's why you should sign it. That's why you should know it before you sign it. Consult who you need to, do what you got to do. But I'm Kyle Wong with the Moxie Property Group here in Colorado, licensed real estate agent. If you have any questions about the topics I went through today, please connect with me using the link below. I'm glad we got to enjoy the sunrise together. Catch you guys next time.